This is a tutorial of how to build the rosary you're looking at here. It's mostly made from industrial parts. It's really tough. I haven't had one break in years, and it's great in the pocket. You know how those rosaries get tangled up and then they break? Well, this won't do that. And they're a lot of fun to make. It's a great use of your time. So here we go. So here's another look at this rosary that we're going to be going through the process of making. And you get the parts of the rosary, like the crucifix, and usually a 2-inch, 1 3/4 inch crucifix, the centerpiece, in this case, the Miraculous metal centerpiece, and the little medal that you see here on the back. Those all three are purchased from like Catholic gift stores or a Catholic supply store. All the rest of the parts you see on the rosary are hardware parts purchased from a hardware parts supplier, which we'll go through. So I certainly can't take credit for the design of this rosary. A friend of mine, DeCelles, showed me how to make these, and I checked with him, and he said it'd be okay to post this up so that other people might be able to make them if they feel like they want to be doing something during these times of shut-in and inability to go out and do things. Again, all this was delivered, the parts I'm going to show you were delivered directly from the suppliers. So as I said, this is the packing list from McMaster-Carr. You can find them online. And the supplies come in a box, you know, like this, with your chain, which is then the beads, and then the links and the splicing links and screw mount links. And we'll take a closer look at all those parts as we go through this. So it'll come in a box like that. You'll probably go to a Catholic supply store to get the crucifixes, generally 3-inch in height. 2-inch in height, and centerpieces for rosaries. So here's an overview of the operation. Of course, coffee is required. You'll notice a heat gun there. That's kind of the last step of the operation. Here are 24 rosary sets. I use just muffin tins to hold the parts as you get them brought together. And then, you know, this is a shot of a rosary ready to be assembled. Pretty much the only thing you have to do to get to this first stage is cut the chain into the appropriate lengths. And for that, you know, I have a template so that you can just match it up and then clip the chain with wire cutters to 12. You want 12 for the decade lengths, because one on each end goes into a link, splicing link, which you then cover with what's not seen here is the heat shrink tubing, which become the Our Father beads. All right, so you know, you're able to grab one set after you bring the parts together, count them out, and put them together. The other pieces, and these I don't get from McMaster-Carr. I've bought them, these split rings. These are available at a lot of your hobby stores. You don't want jump rings, you want split rings. They're going to hold much better the parts together. And so we'll take a look at then, and they are 8mm in size. And the trade parts here are the industrial parts. Here are these connecting links for the chain. These are trade size 13 is what they're called. And same thing for the swivel links. It's trade size 13 chain, And then for the off the crucifix up to the centerpiece, of course there's 3 Hail Mary beads, so there's 5. It's a length of 5 cut because they'll go into the links. And then these are trade size 10 swivel links, and we use those in a special way to kind of way it looks when you have just the split ring trying to attach to one of these beads. It's got to attach to something, and so I'll show that as we go through putting one of these together. All right, so yeah, the only thing here not shown is the heat shrink tubing, which I also get from McMaster-Carr, and that heat shrink tubing is you'll see in the last step. So here we are beginning the assembly, and I always start with the crucifix. And the first thing you have to do is you have to take off the jump ring, which is what most of these that are, when you buy them, come with. It's a little ring, you just twist it, and that's why I don't use jump rings. They pull apart very easily. I then take the beads, the little piece of chain. Again, remember it's 5 links, and you put one end into one of the connecting links, and you just snap it in with one of the links of the chain sitting into one end of the link. And you put one on each end, and then that'll leave 3 exposed beads in the middle. Then you're going to take that swivel link, that trade size 10, the smaller one's swivel link, and you're going to put that in so that that ring there sticks out at the top of the connecting link. So you have your split ring has something to connect to. So you put the ball of that trade size 10 swivel link in, and you pop it in just kind of like you did the chain. And then that leaves that ring exposed. So then you put the other one on the other end. Pop that in. Of course, one end of this is going to connect to the crucifix, and one end is going to connect to the centerpiece by way of those jump rings. But we'll get to that later. So here's the chain for the Hail Mary beads. And now we'll take these split rings and we're going to attach them. And I always attach them first to these swivel links, because they're a little bit thicker piece of metal. And while you can maneuver the whole split ring without something else attached to it, I get it onto these swivel links. So you kind of split that open, and then you thread it on, just kind of like you do with a key onto a key ring. It's a little bit smaller to work, but you can certainly do it. And you spin it around until it's on. And you do that on each end of that chain. Now there is a tool they have, specially made, and you'll find it in the craft section where you can buy the split rings at Wal-Mart or any, especially a craft store. I'm sure they have even more advanced tools, but it kind of pops it open. I found it's harder to use that than just your fingers and getting it on to the jump ring. And then when you go to put it on the crucifix here, it's pretty straightforward. You again open that ring up and slip the little ring of the crucifix and start to feed it through, and it turns much easier on the crucifix and on the centerpiece. That's where I stop with that, and now we're going to shift over to the other. Okay, so then now for the decades of the Rosary. See, I've got the 5 lengths of 12 beads on the chain. I start with one of these end links called swivel links. These are 13 size, same as the chain, and I pop those in. Very different than what we showed on the crucifix. So that's the start end, and now you start putting in these connector links, which are like that, like we used over there. Only here you're going to put chain in both sides, and that'll become an Our Father bead. And then you keep moving down. It's just torque that you want to use to pop it through the pinched area on these links, connector links. And now we put on our 5th decade, right? So we're out of links if you've counted it out right, and the other end will get one of the swivel links, and that's popped on. So now we have these. So now again on these swivel links we're going to attach 2 split rings, and then attach one end to one of the top eyelets of the centerpiece, and then leave the other end open until we put the 4 pieces of shrink tubing on for the Our Father beads over those connectors. Oh, I like to put them on these bigger, beefier connectors without having anything else in the way, and then easily feed it through the eyelet of the You can see there how that's starting to go on, and then you just keep pulling it around till it pops on. So you see those going on right there. And then, as I said, connect one end of it. That way all the pieces are brought together into 2 segments that are going to be put together after the heat shrink tubing is in place. And there you go. So one end is attached. That end will be attached over there once we have heat shrink tubing on. And that end, the crucifix, will be attached to the bottom end. And that'll bring this rosary piece together. So now let's take a look at the heat shrink tubing. So here's the heat shrink tubing that I mentioned. It comes in about, I think they're saying 4-foot lengths. It's 0.4 inch heat shrink tubing. You can see where they just have folded it up and put it in the box that the other parts seen earlier were delivered. For completeness, here's some of the things I use. I use the scissors to cut the heat shrink tubing, and I use these tin snips. I'm sure wire cutters work also to cut the chain. So the chain will come on a link like this, and I'll have a list of supplies that show you what you need to buy per rosary. And that'll include then, if you're going to make 20 rosaries, what would be the total length of chain you'd want to buy, and they sell it by the foot. And I'll show you how we do the cutting. So I've got the chain rolling out from the spool, and I just lay it up against the template, and with that end bead, pull it straight to that bead. I've got tape holding the sample down, and then I go to this right here, I leave exposed that link that I'm going to cut. And so I take the tin snips, holding this in the right spot, and then I just cut that link right there. And so that'll be 12. And then you rapidly keep going through that, and you get the sets built out. So for each one, it's 5 of these. So, across that, you're cutting about 125 little links of that. And then, of course, when you do the Hail Mary beads off the crucifix, I just count those out. 2, there's 4, there's the 5th one, so I'm going to cut it right there. And I take the snips, and so that's why I use the tray, because you get into the rhythm of it, and you're just cutting lengths of chain, and you're filling up the muffin pan, holders, and then you have a set of chain. Then you add the links, and you add the crucifix and the centerpiece, and you've got a whole assembly there ready to start. So again, this is kind of one of the most time-consuming parts. The next thing I do, and I do all of that up front. The last thing I do is I go and cut the lengths of heat shrink tubing to final assembly of the rosary. So I'm going to take one that I've previously done. Let's move that out of the way. Take the crucifix and its Hail Mary beads and the decades and lay that out. So what we're doing is we're putting heat shrink tubing over each of these 4 links that connect the 5 decades, and then over each of these 2 links. So there's 6 pieces of heat shrink tubing for each rosary, assembled rosary. And what we want is the length of the heat shrink tubing to just cover that connecting link right there. So you can do that by, again, a template where you cut the first one and then make every one that same length. And so here, and I pretty much just eyeball it this way. I find that length I want, and then I take a pair of scissors and make that cut. So now I will use that piece to cut all the rest of the lengths, 6 per rosary, to then put on. Tedious process, so I'm not going to show that part, but that's what you keep doing. Now, if you happen to have in the house, for example, a paper cutter, a straight edge cutter, you could then actually take a measurement and realize that this is about 7 millimeters long, and you would then lay this flat and flatten it on the paper cutter, and just with a straight edge keep sliding it through at 7 millimeters and cutting those pieces off that way. That's if you happen to have that tool, it can speed up this part of the process. Okay, so I have the 6 pieces of heat shrink tubing cut, and I'm going to start and drop 4 of them onto this decade segment of the rosary. Just get those fed on there. So there's 4 on there. Not really positioning them right now. Then I'm going to lock it in by attaching this split ring to the other end of the centerpiece. And there you have it. So the other 2 will go on to the Hail Mary beads by the crucifix. So slide those on, and then attach this piece, this split ring, to the bottom of the centerpiece. It's like putting the key on the key chain. Alright, So there you have it. Now we'll go over to the heat gun and shrink this tubing up. So on mine that I bought at Harbor Freight, as you can see, I've secured it to a stable base. It's pointing directly up, so that I can just hold the piece over where the heat is coming out, keep my fingers out of the way, and shrink that down. So I put that setting on low, and I position this so that it's over that link piece and you can see the rings, and then slowly bring that in and close and turn it, and you can see it shrink down onto that link into a very nice orthotic bead. And then I do the same thing at the other end of the Hail Mary beads. Just let that tubing shrink down onto that link, and then we have the two orthotic beads there. Now I start at one end, and you got to watch, those are going to be hot, so you got to hold the parts of the chain that you can. And they can slip around. You get that positioned about right, and then slowly bring it in. If it slides, pull it back out quickly, and try to just use that rotational motion to evenly shrink it down. And again, remember, it's going to be hot for a few beads around that center link, so there you go. There's two of them done. Next to the last one here. Position this last one. There you have it. That is the completed rosary.